Thank you, Madam Deputy President.
No, we will see.
The Animal Justice Party is in a difficult position because biosecurity is important for the welfare of humans, animals, the health of food and the protection of the environment. And we do agree with the principle outlined that biosecurity is a responsibility for everybody in New South Wales. But as it is at the moment, we cannot support this bill in its current form for three reasons. The executive government is insisting on exercising excessive power, let alone refusing to give that administration to the police and the judiciary, and this strikes at the fundamental principle of the Westminster system, held in high esteem and based on fundamental democracy, and this has evolved over almost 1,000 years. Secondly, because of the excessive punitive penalties. And thirdly, as has been trumpeted from the rooftops by the government, it's claiming that this bill is crucial to protecting the activities of agribusiness, including intensive farming or factory farming of poultry, pigs and cattle in the main by cracking down on activists who document cruelty to animals. And that is what they do, document cruelty to animals, nothing else. And there lies the rub. There is absolutely no evidence, nil evidence, that activists have brought any disease onto a property in New South Wales, onto any farm property in New South Wales. The person standing here at this microphone is the person who trained most of these activists up to adhere strictly to the biosecurity regulations in the federal national legislation from AusVet Plan. They strictly adhere to those regulations and requirements, document that, and it has been used in numerous courts to show a magistrate or a judge that these people have acted responsibly, reasonably, and have taken all possible measures to prevent any disease being brought to the animals or to the farm. So rather the source, interestingly, of all of the outbreaks of diseases across New South Wales and Australia, the cause and the culprit is agribusiness itself, are the workers coming and going from these farms, sale yards, animals such as bobby calves being picked up in trucks from dairy farm to dairy farm to dairy farm, all loaded onto the same truck, and then all taken to one sale yard, mixed or beside each other. These have been the petri dishes, the cesspools, where disease such as swine flu, bird flu and other diseases have occurred. It has occurred because it's been introduced by the industry itself, not by activists. Swine flu, for example, in the Hunter Valley, the outbreak there, the clear culprit were workers coming to that property from other piggeries where they hadn't abided by what the activists had abided by in making sure that they had not been near an abattoir or another pig farm for the former 14 days. The World Health Organization has made it very clear it has a grave concern about the outbreak of bird flu in an airborne form. Bird flu, H5N1, is a disease that the World Health Organization has made it clear that they have serious concerns about intensive poultry sheds where you have an average of 22,000 birds, 44,000 rich, blood-enriched lungs flushing away, and in these lungs, bird flu as it is now can land, can arrive, and it's a perfect opportunity in an intensive shed for this virus to mutate into an airborne form. And this is the risk, this is the problem, because H5N1, when it does infect somebody, 53% of the people who are infected by bird flu die. It is very similar to the Spanish flu, H1N1, from the World War I trenches, where the soldiers came home and and the flu incubated in them because they had lived in these dreadful conditions similar to intensive farms. And then H1N1 killed millions of people in the world. This came from these environments which are cesspits, which are an environment of abnormal stress for animals, abnormal populations and stocking densities and accumulation of faeces and urine, which is so a fundamental part of the intensive livestock industry. There has been an outbreak of golden staphylococcus in a piggery in Young only several months ago. Golden staph outbreaks occur in hospitals amongst very sick people who have open wounds or are elderly or infirm, and they have to be seriously compromised to attract such an infection. So the question is brought to bear, why is this disease, Staphylococcus outbreak, occurred amongst workers in a piggery where the pigs didn't bring it, the pigs weren't carrying it, but there was an environment, as I just described, of intensive farming, where a virus was able to go forth and multiply and become a disease affecting healthy workers in a piggery, not sick or diseased people in hospitals. Another example is Newcastle disease outbreak in the Central Coast. This raises some very important issues, and that is that this disease also was brought by contaminants from other poultry industry, not activists. But this particular outbreak raised very serious issues in terms of animal protection and welfare. Orders were made to kill hundreds of thousands of birds, and there has been numerous accounts from firefighters, from army, from the police, that many birds were not killed humanely, that they were placed in these drums with carbon dioxide gas, and then because the operation had to move so quickly, other birds were thrown on top of them before they had died, and many had suffocated. There was even a report which was published that one of the main operators up there instructed one of the owners of the property who had the sheds on them to, because it was becoming too expensive to kill these birds through carbon dioxide, and maybe timely, it was decided to go down, he was instructed to go down to 2 sheds, turn the heat up to maximum and shut off the ventilation. And the birds cooked to death. Now this was unlawful, both because there was no application under the Animal Research Act to perform an experiment, but also caused extreme aggravated cruelty to animals. So whatever committee, whatever authority is established under this Biosecurity Act, Biosecurity Bill, there must be a person that has a great deal of experience in animal protection to ensure that orders are not made when they are made to kill animals, and that's the case when often the case when a disease is brought or introduced onto a property. That what must be done is that this kind of cruelty and extreme egregious suffering does not occur to animals that are considered diseased. Now, the reason this animal activism, which seems to be, for some reason, has been included in this Biosecurity Bill and shrouded behind some actually quite constructive principles within the bill, but what needs to be understood that animal activists who have never brought a disease and who would certainly be much prefer to be doing other things than to be entering properties in the early hours of the morning or late at night. They'd prefer to be at an opera or Beethoven's Seventh Symphony or a concert with Coldplay, but rather, out of frustration because of the failure of authorities to address often large-scale distress and suffering, they have entered these places. Now, what's extraordinary, the evidence as to the fruits of their good work is clear. There have been many major interventions and investigations and changes for animals in the interests of the community, of the New South Wales community, and in the interests of the government, because there have been serious interventions undertaken by the authorities after the evidence was gathered by these activists. A perfect example is Hawkesbury Valley Meats, west of Sydney. This was an abattoir which was killing all species of animals except poultry, and because people who were working there were so distressed and frustrated by the fact that no authority was able to depict and detect serious, egregious cruelty to animals, cameras were installed by activists with the help of employees. Those cameras documented 19 days of some of the most extreme brutalities inflicted upon cattle, sheep, goats and calves. It was so egregious that the police and the food authority marched in with orders and closed that abattoir down for 4 months. And the only reason they would open the abattoir again, and this is an important factor, is that the abattoir agreed for mandatory CCTV cameras over critical points of animal welfare. This happened under the watch of the former Minister for Primary Industries, Katrina Hodgkinson. These animals were under her care. The former minister was responsible for the care of these animals ultimately as she carried the portfolio. Yet, every time the authorities went to this abattoir on reports of cruelty, all you have to do is knock on the door and say you've arrived, and then what happens is the whistle goes and acts of violence against animals stop as the authorities walk through. The only way the evidence was gathered at this place where this cruelty to animals was happening for a long period of time, undetected, was because of the activists. And another example is the live baiting in Queensland and New South Wales. It's become evident from the investigations by the police and the fact that people have been dismissed and stepped down, is that live baiting has been systemic and ongoing for a long time. And live baiting is illegal.
Point of order.
The Minister on a point of order.
Madam Deputy President, there is nowhere in this bill that it even comes close to the issue of the matter in which the member is talking about at the moment, and I ask that you bring him back to the relevant issues contained within the bill.
There is a wide latitude given in the second read, and I'll allow the member to continue.
What I'm talking about relates very much to the statements being made that have been made by the Honourable Minister for Primary Industries and the Premier, that this bill will prevent activists from entering onto properties. And I'm saying activists entering onto properties have revealed this extreme suffering. Wally's Piggery is another example which is now shut down. It had been, there have been ongoing acts of brutality towards animals for many, many, many years, undetected, out of utter frustration and wanting to bring help for the animals, uphold the principles of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. People went, installed cameras, documented cruelty, and the police, the RSPCA, the Animal Welfare League, all went marching in and undertook a major investigation. A turkey abattoir at Tarmore, police prosecuted that operation for torturing animals under the Crimes Act in New South Wales. Evidence was gathered by people who installed cameras because there was utter frustration about the fact that they had not, the cruelty reports had not been properly investigated. And just recently, there's been CCTV or cameras put in an abattoir, the largest piggery and abattoir for pigs in the Southern Hemisphere. And that footage showed extreme egregious suffering of pigs being gassed and suffocating to death. But moreover, it also, what's very important to the movement and to the community is that the practices which are sanctioned by the government at the moment, common intensive farming practice such as battery cages, sow stores and live export, these issues have been exposed by activists, not the RSPCA, not the regulatory authorities, but by activists, and have brought enormous changes for these animals, where retailers, for example, are phasing out cage eggs, phasing out sow stalls, and there's a major expose of the live export. So, as I said earlier, we are very seriously concerned about this bill, and at the moment we cannot possibly support it, but we know that there are a lot of amendments that are coming forth, and a lot of amendments from the opposition, from the Greens, from the Christian Democrats, and from the Shooters and Fishers Party, and most of those we will probably support, but at the end of the day we will have to weigh up whether this bill is in the best interests really of biosecurity and human health and animals. But I think, just in reflection on the issue of being excessive in punishment, being unforgiving, being oppressive and punitive to people who are exposing this type of cruelty to animals and treatment of animals, I think in the prayers that are said at the sitting of the House every day, there is one very clear prayer that was uttered by a very important man just over 2,000 years ago, and that is, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us."
Who said that?